Hello and welcome to Levant TV headlines. Only about 60 Syrians are being trained by the United States to take on the Islamic State group, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter said, admitting it was far below the number he had hoped for. 5 Egyptian civilians were killed on Wednesday when a mortar round hit a house in a North Sinai village where the army is battling jihadist insurgents, security officials said. Talks towards an historic nuclear deal between Iran and major powers go into overtime Wednesday after stumbling over what one Western diplomat called very tough remaining issues. The first official peace talks between the Afghan Taliban and the government in Kabul concluded with an agreement to meet again after the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, officials said on Wednesday. The UN Security Council has postponed a vote recognizing the Srebrenica massacre as genocide after Russia threatened to veto the draft text, even as Serbia's Prime Minister called for reconciliation 20 years after the slaughter. Now let's take a look at the top headlines in today's newspapers in the Middle East. Starting from Lebanon, the Daily Star leads, reporting that the trial of a Lebanese-born doctor who has admitted to falsely diagnosing patients with cancer and over-treating genuine cancer patients to collect millions of dollars began this week in Detroit, with family members of his victims describing him as a monster and killer. The paper also reports that Hezbollah and Syrian army forces Wednesday advanced further into a northwestern region of a Syrian border town, which has been the scene of fierce fighting over the past week. From the UAE, the Khalij Times leads, reporting that more than a third of drivers have fallen asleep behind the wheel at some point in their lives. Motorists are constantly cautioned against the risks of driving while feeling sleepy or exhausted, particularly during the holy month of Ramadan, where the concentration of some drivers drops due to changes in the human body triggered by fasting. The paper also reports that Turkey's disaster management agency is readying a giant new refugee camp to house 55,000 people in the south of the country in anticipation of a new wave of migrants fleeing the civil war in Syria, reports said Wednesday. The Egypt Independent leads, reporting that the April 6 youth movement has joined critics of the anti-terrorism bill the government plans to submit to the presidency for approval, labeling it as unconstitutional and restricting freedoms. The government has introduced the bill amid escalating encounters between Egypt's military and militants in North Sinai. The paper also reports that Gad al-Tharwa party chief Ayman Noor left to Turkey on Tuesday, ending a 2-year stay in Lebanon since the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. He cited fears for his personal safety. Now let's take a look at the top Middle East headlines from the UK papers. The Independent leads with ISIS in Syria, stating that influential tribal leaders are holding secret talks with Western powers and Gulf states over possibility of mobilizing against militants. These leaders wield enormous influence and command hundreds of thousands of Syrians through the extended clan system. At confidential talks to which they were invited with the UN envoy Staffan de Mistura 2 weeks ago in Geneva, 11 of their leaders were asked to help reach a peace deal with the Syrian government. The Guardian leads its Middle East news, reporting that an Iraqi court has issued death sentences to 24 militants for their role in killing hundreds of soldiers last year. 4 others were acquitted for lack of evidence. The soldiers were captured by Islamic State when it overran Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit in summer 2014. At the time, they were trying to flee from a nearby army base. Now let's take a look at the top Middle East headlines in the international papers. The Washington Post reports that nuclear talks between Iran and world powers pushed past their latest deadline Tuesday as negotiators insisted that a deal could be reached by the end of the week, but said they remain ready to walk away if agreement proves impossible. Negotiators hesitated to call their new goal of completing an agreement by Friday a deadline. And finally, the Deutsche Welle reports that US Defense Secretary Ashton Carter has told Congress that the US has only trained 60 Syrian fighters since the anti-Islamic State program began. The scheme was expected to yield as many as 5,400 local fighters per year. And for more updates, please visit levant.tv. Thanks for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow. Bye for now.